The beast has been awakened, ladies and gentlemen. Sean Marks is making moves, people. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brooklyn Boys Show. I am your host, Josh Wolliver, joined today by a very special guest, Brooklyn Nets on Sports Illustrated writer Colin Simmons. Colin, great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Appreciate you joining us again. And Nets have begun to make some moves earlier today. We had two moves come in just within the last couple of hours. First, the signing of EJ Liddell to a two-way contract. That one's per Michael Scotto, and former second-round pick out of Ohio State. He spent majority of time in the G League last year, averaging close to 16 points a game. Colin, my first question for you: is this a guy who you think can make an impact at the NBA level this upcoming year? And who fills the final two-way spot?
Man, yeah, I was honestly shocked about the EJ Liddell signing just to begin with. Like, it feels like there's just no break for the Nets at all. Like, every day there's some unexpected signing coming somewhere or another. But as far as EJ goes, I honestly really liked him coming out of Ohio State in college. But he's got very good metrics as an athlete, and I think that's important. But the injuries have been the only thing that's really held him back from really contributing to an NBA team. I think he's shown to be one of the best players in the G League, and I really like his odds at competing for that final two-way spot. We just saw Tosan get waived, so I
Yep.
think bringing in Liddell right after makes sense, and I would eye him as that final two-way contender.
And that's a move I've been harping about for a while now. I did not want Tosan Awoma anywhere near this basketball team.
Yeah.
I felt he had no role on this team, just an aging veteran who would take away minutes and take away a roster spot from guys who are more deserving. And you're right, injuries have held him back. Only played 27 games in the 2024-25 season last year. But when he was on the court, he was a solid contributor, 47, 36, but 66 percent from the free throw line's a little concerning in terms of his splits. For EJ Liddell, who the Nets just signed their latest move after, of course, waiving Tosan Awoma. And smash like and hit subscribe on your way in here if you haven't already. Joined by Colin Simmons of Sports Illustrated. And throw questions, comments, thoughts in the chat. We'll react to those in just a little bit. The other big move of the day, Colin, the Nets finalized the contract of Day'Ron Sharpe. He's officially been signed. It's a 2-year, $12.5 million contract that they made official earlier today. Marks and Sharpe came into agreement. Does this mean anything in terms of the Nets' outlook on the rest of the offseason? Because we know the signing wasn't official until now because they were looking to see what the cap space situation would look like. And could this mean they're done looking for external players to bring in? And why do you think it took this long for Sharpe to get signed, if not?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't think it changes much as far as the outlook going forward. We all kind of knew that this signing was inevitable. Like the agreement was there, but it was
Right.
never just officially inked. And I do not expect Brooklyn to bring any other salary dump candidates into the team.
Mm.
There's really no need at this point. And we've kept saying that though, and it seems like another move
Right.
keeps continuing to happen. Like we weren't expecting Haywood Highsmith, but here we are now. But I think Day'Ron Sharpe down. Next up, Zaire Williams will come too. And then eventually Cam Thomas signing that qualifying offer.
Exactly, and that's what's now on the front of Nets fans' minds. When does the Zaire Williams contract officially get inked? Because him and Day'Ron Sharpe both agreed unofficially to their deals, but they agreed to terms with the Nets
Mhm.
much earlier in the offseason, and the Nets have held off on signing, so they've made the Day'Ron Sharpe contract official. Now it becomes the question of when does this same thing happen for the Zaire Williams project, and a guy that I absolutely wanted to bring back both of them. So happy that the Nets are finally circling around to making that official. But at the end there, you mentioned about the salary dumps, how you don't think Brooklyn will bring in too many other prospects. They still have the salary cap available. And obviously,
Mhm.
the headline of the offseason has been the Cam Thomas situation. But what do you think they do with the remaining salary cap? Because they're not yet at the salary floor. And if they don't give off that money, I think they'll just be handing it out to players and evenly distributing it. So what happens if Cam Thomas doesn't get the remainder of that money?
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's obviously needs to be thought about. I think if Cam Thomas doesn't get that extra salary, which is what I'm predicting happens, I think then that's when you see the salary dumps come in. Like, I think the main one I've been hearing right now is Max Prosper would be the next one to come in. I think that makes sense just for the timeline. It's someone who might actually figure into future plans. And then Peyton Watson has been another guy I've heard as potential candidate for that because he's going to be somewhere in between that 10 to 20 million range, and Denver may not be able to pay that. So Brooklyn may be looking to take in a guy who can play right away.
Absolutely. But how many more second round draft picks do you need continues to be the question. We just need Sean Marks to start hitting on a couple of these picks and give him a bigger reason to stay around in the long term. And he can trade for as many picks as he wants. But now the question at some point becomes, is he the acting GM of the Brooklyn Nets when these picks are slotted to be made? So that, of course, something that will be a very interesting thing. But you mentioned you don't think that the Cam Thomas situation will resolve itself with him finding a new contract. If I heard that right, do you think he takes the qualifying offer for $6 million, come back here, and then the Nets try and ship him off ASAP situation? Or do you think there's a possibility where he comes back on a 2-year deal and revitalizes a little bit of that love that was spoiled throughout this offseason?
I mean, everything's really leading up to him signing that qualifying offer to
Yep.
play on this season. Uh, and the weird thing is Cam Thomas has not had like one negative thing to say about the organization this whole offseason. He still wants to be here, even despite the contract like disputes, which just goes to show like how little control he probably has over that. He's just leaving that all to his agent. But as far as that goes, I'm never a big fan of these disputes ending in a long-term relationship afterwards. I think when he does sign that qualifying offer, it will be to ultimately move him at some point, whether that's during this season or going into next offseason. But I like Cam Thomas signing that qualifying offer and at least playing up to near the trade deadline this season.
Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Josh Williver, the Brooklyn Boys Show. Throw questions, comments, thoughts in the chat. Colin and I will get to those and react to those in just a couple of minutes. Catching you up on the latest Nets signings. It was EJ Liddell. It was Day'Ron Sharpe officially getting onto the contract books earlier today. And we saw Tosan Awoma officially. The Nets requested waivers for him earlier in the week. And the Nets are hovering right around that training camp limit with the signing of Liddell. Who do you think are the next couple guys on that chopping block, either to be traded or to be cut or waived? And that can either be pre-training camp or post-training camp or maybe somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting right now. There's like a group of like 3 or 4 guys that I think are for sure like the obvious candidates. I think that goes like Tyrese Martin, Keon Johnson, and Drew Timme
Yep.
would be like the guys that I'm looking at to be potential cut candidates, which is just like they're guys that are kind of like in that weird range where they're not old, but they're not young for this team. So I think those guys are the ones that are going to be gone next before training camp.
And those are the player options that Sean Marks elected to pick up earlier in the offseason. And those are also guys that, you mentioned it, for NBA lifespan, don't exactly seem old. None of them are veterans in this league here, but you look around and Jalen Wilson is at the age of 23, and some of these draft prospects that you just hit on are 19 years old. So when you look at that comparative difference, you say, which one can have an easier time developing at the NBA level? And you got to kind of steer away from those guys that, yeah, the Nets thought they had something in earlier this offseason, but the roster is filled up extremely quickly. And I agree. I think Keon Johnson, Tyrese Martin, and Jalen Wilson. To me, I kind of feel like Drew Timme is as close to a roster spot as any of those guys. I want to hear your thoughts on this, but just to me, you get a backup for in Timme, who was a star at Gonzaga and did a lot for the Nets on Long Island last season when he came up towards the end of the season, was a really solid contributor, giving you close to double digits a night. Do you think that Drew Timme is someone who solidified himself on this Nets team, or is it going to take a lot more than what he's shown?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate for Timme because he has done everything right
Right.
as a player, like going from G League last year to showing he can improve with short time, and this summer league being one of the best players out there. And I think of those three guys that I mentioned, he's definitely at the top of the list as being like almost like a secured a roster spot. But especially with the front court depth, I think there's a lot of unproven guys there, and there's still people that can be moved around. Like Claxton is not a for sure thing to be on this team for the full season here. And I think having that insurance policy in Timmy, someone who's never going to be probably a big star or even a starter in the league, but someone who you can rely on night in and out from the bench. I think Timmy is almost secured to be on the 15-man.
Very interesting. And you mentioned Nick Claxton there, probably a guy that Nets fans have heard ringing in their ear throughout the offseason. There's been a ton of trade talks, trade rumors about shipping him out. We just saw, obviously, the contract extension of Day'Ron Sharpe earlier today. The way I view it, I think Sharpe was probably a better basketball player than Claxton was last offseason. He was a more efficient rebounder. In their rebounding splits were about equal in about half as much time for Day'Ron Sharpe on the court. If he can elevate it, and I was talking in Nets Twitter earlier today, if he can elevate that number to 35% from three, if Day'Ron Sharpe can become a solid interior defender, you're talking about a guy who takes significant progress towards a starting center role. And then you got to move on from Nick Claxton, because if you got your guy at 2 years, $12.5 million, it makes absolutely no sense to have another guy in front of him that's at 4 years, $100 million. So where could you see the Nets moving on from Nick Claxton, a couple potential trade partners, and what they would get back?
First of all, I like what you're saying about Day'Ron Sharpe. I talked about him early in the offseason about one of the Nets' most underrated player coming into the season.
Yeah.
I think he does not get enough love as one of the best rebounders per minutes based in the league.
Yeah.
And also like an underrated defender. He's not at that level of Claxton. That's probably Claxton's best trait.
Right.
But he is young and still developing on that end. And I love me a good physical big. And then as far as where Nick Claxton could go, I have not heard too many things right now, but the overwhelming just urge in me wants to say I think the Celtics could be a partner in the future.
Yeah.
I think the cap doesn't really make sense too much for them there, but they definitely have the chance to offload Simons in a deal for that. So and the Nets have been somewhat linked to him as potentially taking on some salary there and then taking back some picks. So I think Simons and a first, maybe a second thrown in there as well would make sense. But the chatter for Claxton has kind of slowed down. I think that has a lot to do with just Cam Thomas being the focus of the offseason. So I honestly don't think Claxton will be moved at the deadline. I think it's more of a sign and trade type of deal later on. But I think it is inevitable for Claxton to be moved.
Ton of stuff you just mentioned there. If Sharpe can take the next level, that'd be awesome as a defensive center. But look, he's 6'9", so how much can you defend a Joel Embiid, a peak Giannis at 6'9"? You're obviously going to have trouble doing that. And I think that's part of the reason, honestly. I think that could be correlated to a little bit of what Sean Marks was thinking, drafting a 7-footer in Danny Wolf out of Michigan. And you have the size there. Wolf, is coming into the league unpolished, but Sharpe's a great basketball player, but there's a couple things that you can't train, and one of those is adding height to yourself. So Day'Ron Sharpe, as great as he can be as a three-point shooter, as great as he can be as a solid rebounder, he can't get any taller. So it's going to be tough for him to have a sustained life as a sort of shot blocker and paint presence as Nick Claxton is in the league. And I think part of the reason, as you mentioned, that Nick Claxton was dominating the headlines to begin with was because nobody had the dang money to pay Cam Thomas. So, of course, there was no reason to be overhyping that issue and to be talking about it so much. We thought the Nets would get it done, snap of a finger, it would be out the window. And here we sit on a September 3rd edition of the Brooklyn Boys Show. at 7:50 p.m., about 3 months after we would have thought Cam Thomas would have re-signed with the Nets. And we have no motion and we're at a standstill. So I think that the Nick Claxton ideas are as evident as they've ever been. It's just been dominated. And I think Boston, you're right, is center desperate right now. And I really don't know where they go. They have a solid basketball team, but
Mhm.
the star of their show, Jason Tatum's done for the year. So can you kind of stall it out and basically hit the pause button on this season? Maybe try and get a not great lottery pick, but a lottery pick at that to try and boost a little bit of your depth and make another finals run next year. Can you sell into the fact that you want to compete as a basketball team without your best player? Is also a big question for Boston. So personally, I don't think they'd be interested in pursuing a Nick Claxton right now just because they're not in the position to contend. But my question for you after all this, and I've been rambling a little bit here, but my question for you is if you get the Anthony Simons trade dump from a Claxton trade, where does Cam Thomas fit back into this equation? And is it a one or the other? Let's say Cam Thomas comes back on the qualifying offer. Uh, is an Anthony Simons salary dump now off the table because you don't have much more room for a guy like that? And I get that you take on the picks, but what are you going to do with him after that?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I guess with the salary dump candidates, I think that if Anthony Simons is a guy that the Nets are looking to bring in for some salary, that kind of is you're having to pick one or the other at that point. And it would
Hmm.
be between him and Thomas. And I think that's when they would try to make a Thomas move, or they could potentially look at moving on Simon somewhere else because who knows if he even wants to play in a place like Brooklyn where he's playing alongside a Michael Porter Jr. and all these other young guys that are competing for touches
Yep.
when he's trying to establish himself as a player who's never been an all-star but has that sort of potential. So I think he'd want to go somewhere where he can compete and potentially make a playoff run. So I don't.
MPJ. Sorry, did I
No, no,
cut
no.
you off
Keep
there?
going. I love MPJ. Keep going.
MPJ, a guy that we were talking a little bit backstage
Mhm.
before we got started here on the show. A guy that has dominated the headlines in pretty much all the wrong ways recently, but he has a chance to salvage his Brooklyn career. You can't trade him because he's going to be taking on a $40 million cap hit. So there's no chance he hit that salary off the books. You're just going to have to eat the MPJ contract and hope it doesn't affect the tank too much here because, at 28 per night score, which is what some Nets fans have him as, it is not something that a team looking for the first overall pick wants on their roster.
Yeah, about Michael Porter Jr. And for those that don't know, I go to Mizzou, so that is Michael Porter Jr.'s alma mater, even though he only played 2 games there. But so I've been familiar with him for a while, and I think just as far as him factoring into the Nets' plans right now, he just I just don't really understand how it's gonna look this season with him surrounded by all these young guys. And obviously someone needs to score the ball, and that probably will be Porter Jr. more often than not. But the likelihood that those there was the comments earlier about him contending for the scoring title this year by an anonymous Nets coach. I don't know if you can rely on him taking that big of a jump just off of opportunity. And I do like the fact that he's reuniting with Fernandez. I think that plays a factor a lot. And the front office has said that they're not looking to move on from Porter Jr., at least right now. So I just kind of think that Porter Jr. is a guy that you're stuck with. And the situation really, I don't think it's going to end up, it doesn't have to be a negative, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There is a world where he is an efficient 25 plus and he is elevating guys like Yegor Domain and Nolan Traore as playmakers. So there is a bright side to this situation for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned the conflict. You want someone to be able to be a good scorer with the ball in their hands, but you want to have a chance to develop at least some of your 5 rookies. I don't think that Ben Saraf is going to get a ton of minutes on Brooklyn this year. Let me know what you think about that. But the catch-22 where you need someone to score, but you don't want this guy ball hogging away from Tillman, from Traore, from Powell is something that's extremely interesting that'll have to play out.
Yeah, starting with Serif, I do agree with you. I think out of the 5 rookies, he's most likely the odd man out that will be spending most of his time in Long Island.
Yep.
I think it was clear off summer league play that he is the most unrefined player, and I'm not sure he's quite ready for the speed and physicality of the NBA. I think he'll definitely see some run later in the season when the
Yep.
Nets are truly not playing for anything.
Post trade deadline.
Yeah, but then guys like Demeen and Traore, I think they have the best shot at lined up for minutes. There's really no one else in terms of facilitating the ball. Like maybe Keon Johnson if he finds a way onto the roster, eats into some of those minutes, but I don't think you
I
should
don't think
invest in that
so.
at all. And then Powell is really just the mystery of this draft class. Everyone
Mhm.
loves him because he's like so different than everyone else in the draft class. He's the only guy that's like just an athletic freak and really is being projected as an impact player just off intangibles. So I'm not sure what to think of that. And coming off the injury, it's sounding like it could be worse than let on previously because he's still not really practicing and doing many runs. So, but I am excited about him. I think he can bring something that really the Nets don't have on the roster right now. And then going into Wolf, I think he will also see a fair amount of minutes because he is the only one that's not 19. He has real veteran experience. And I think he showed in that last game of Summer League that despite having some turnover troubles and when he does these flashy passes he tries to make, that causes some trouble, but he can step out, shoot the 3, and facilitate all at 7 feet tall. So I think that's someone you have to try to get on the court and get experience.
I love Wolf. I think he could be a big plus for this Nets team, but at the 5, you have Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe. At the 4, you have probably MPJ followed by Noah Clowney. Where does Wolf fit into this? I want him into the equation. I'm just having trouble with the mental math with 2 guys ahead of him at both the positions he plays.
Yeah, I think that'll all be dependent on one, where Noah Clowney even plays, because
Right.
he has played all 3 through 5 during his time
So
with the
interesting.
Nets. And I think that he'll be more of the 3 just for the sakes of getting Wolf on the court. I think he'll be kind of backing up Zaire, assuming he starts the
Yeah.
3. And that's where Wolf kind of slides in. But then obviously that like brings in the factor that like is Jalen Wilson just out of the rotation
Right.
then? And
Is
then
Terrence Mann out of the rotation?
yeah, like where does he play? Like it's so hard to see.
It's
This is
just
the problem with
booting
me.
guys in and out of spots. It's yeah, you can
Yeah.
shuffle it the way you
He's
want, but at the end of the day, 5 guys are gonna be on the court and the rest aren't.
It's a good problem to have, but at the same time, you do kind of have to choose who you want to develop because if you try to balance both, then you might be kind of losing 2 potential contributors if you go that route.
Absolutely, and I feel like there's gonna be a game within every game. There's gonna be what was the final score? Did the Nets win or lose? And there's gonna be who looked good, how do we continue to develop them, and what do the future steps look like? And I think this is such an interesting season for head coach Jordy Fernandez. I think we truly get to know what his colors show this season because he wants to win basketball games. That's his job description. And he also, probably more importantly, needs to develop the young guys and sees what he have at AM. Because if you don't do that this season and you just put an emphasis on winning, and Michael Porter Jr. and Terrence Mann are taking over the spotlight, and it's just a bunch of vets overshadowing it. Come 2, 3 years down the line when this Nets team is contending for a playoff spot, you have no clue what the young guys behind them can bring. And at that point, their NBA careers are set to expire. So Jordy Fernandez has got to figure out how to both be able to manage a somewhat winning basketball team, assuming he wants to win night in and night out, but also be able to get rookies, get young guys on the floor. That's going to be so interesting. I
Mhm.
think it's going to be a huge tell for what his future as Nets head coach looks like. I want to touch on one of your articles before we move on here to everyone in the chat. Like, subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Hit up Colin if you haven't on Twitter and all that. Colin, you can plug yourself at the end of the show. But how Nick Claxton could see a breakout year with Yegor Gioman at the point guard was the title of one of your latest articles.
Mhm.
please indulge us into the sense of how you see that coming. We were talking a ton about Nick Claxton. We haven't touched a lot on Yegor Gioman, but is this the lob duel right here? Is it Gioman lobbing it up to Claxton for the flush? Is that how this season's going to play out?
I think at least at the start of the season, probably for the full season, I see that duo being one of the highest like assist partners in the NBA. I think it'll be similar how to Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner operate. I think there will be heavy pick and roll opportunities there. The main reason for why I think the two will coexist so well is because Claxton Demon, while at BYU, he was best in the pick and roll with his bigs. He rarely turns over the ball in those opportunities, and especially with the lob opportunity to Claxton, I think that's where the two can really like coexist with each other.
Should be very interesting. Yegor Gioman probably going to be thrown right into the fire as the starting point guard on this team come opening day. Nick Claxton, the longest tenured vet on this team, so you're looking at two completely different angles here. But Nick Claxton's in his prime. Yegor Gioman's entering the league. That should be an extremely interesting duo and how that all plays out. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Go to the comment section and throw your thoughts in there. We'll take a quick break right after this. Colin and I will react to all of your questions, comments, and thoughts presented by Shoreline.
You are listening to the Brooklyn Boys Show with your host, Connor Long. If you're enjoying the show, drop us a sub and leave a like. It helps more Nets fans find us. Quick break, then back to talking Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Today's episode of the Brooklyn Boys Show is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Shoreline Sports Cards, located at 137 Main Street in Port Washington, New York. Whether you're chasing the newest hobby boxes, grabbing singles, or just want to talk cards with fellow collectors, Shoreline is the spot. They've got a massive selection across basketball, football, baseball, and more, with new inventory hitting the shelves every single week. If you're local, make sure to stop by the shop at 137 Main Street in Port Washington and check it out for yourself. If you're not in the area, no worries at all. You can still keep up with Shoreline by following them on Instagram, eBay, and whatnot for product drops, live breaks, deals, and hobby updates. All links are right in the description down below. Huge thanks to Shoreline Sports Cards for supporting the show and the Brooklyn Nets community.
It is the Brooklyn Boys Show live Wednesday, September 3rd, coming to you with Colin Simmons of Brooklyn Nets on Sports Illustrated. Now to your questions, comments, and thoughts. Thank you, Connor, for the earthquake in the background there. Let's check in at the top. Down Under Dunker, what's up, man? I love Sharp over Clax. Wolf and Clowney can both chip in at the center position. Claxton has to go, and is that something that happens now? Trade deadline or next offseason?
In my opinion, this happens next offseason. I don't think it really makes sense to make the move this season with the way the roster is configured. Maybe that changes leading up to the season, but right now all signs are kind of pointing to that being a decision that's pushed to next offseason, mainly because with Claxton's current contract, you really have no reason to get off of it right this instant.
And it's front loaded, so it'll be easier to trade down the line come the back end of that contract. The last year 3 and year 4 that you're paying him less money than you are in 1 and 2, which is we're in the second year of that deal right now. But to me, if Nick Claxton has returned to his form of 2022-23 season, and he is one of the league's best defenders, he's getting close to 2 blocks a night, and you got to find a really desperate team at the deadline. He is definitely someone that I could see the Nets trading at the deadline, just because I think teams will feel the need to panic on a center. He is one of the viable options that Sean Marks is going to have the phone open for. And it's interesting because the Nets have shown a ton of love to Nick Claxton, and he seems to, as much as other teams want and need a center of his caliber, he seems to be a little bit protected and shielded off from the Nets front office. So it'll be extremely, extremely interesting to see if, when, and how Sean Marks goes about dealing Nick Claxton. Let's see here. Are we able to package up both Claxton and Cam Thomas together, maybe for a salary dump and picks? You'd have to get a big haul in return, you'd think.
Yeah.
Both of those guys going out of the building, and those are probably your top two players on the Brooklyn Nets as of right now, in terms of how Sean Marks likes them and their availability.
Yeah, I don't think you just don't really see this much in the NBA where you
Right.
package your two pretty much top players into one deal like this. Like, not a lot of teams will bite at this, for one. So I think that's just an unlikelihood that's going to happen. You would need a big return for that, and I don't think a lot of teams have what the Nets would be looking for in return for that. So that's just too unlikely.
It would be unheard of, and especially if you have Cam Thomas coming back on a contract that is not the qualifying offer. If you're paying him $20 million, that would be packaging up $45 million right there. So, said other team is going to have to do a ton of cap maneuvering if they want to be able to take on both of those contracts. That would be a tough one, to say the least, for Sean Marks to somehow figure out how to get so down under Dunker. Appreciate you tuning in, but I just don't see a feasible way in which that happens. Let's see. Claude Smith is in the building. Thank you for tuning in, Claude. Things are going to be fluid for a while. Roster construction before training camp is just an experiment. I mean, yeah, let's see moving forward who the next couple guys on the chopping block is. I think there are more moves to come. It was kind of a surprise to see EJ Liddell get brought into the building here, but I was also a big proponent of the Tosan Awoma wave. So some good, some bad from Sean Marks. It's been a mixed bag basically his entire tenure, but the Haywood Highsmith experiment. Let's see if he is even on the team come training camp. And if he can get back from injury, because he is probably going to be out right up until around the season opener. So you're looking at a guy who's going to have proven enough previously in the NBA for the Nets to say, all right, we'll grant you a roster spot. So that's going to be a tough one for him to make the team. But I think he does provide you enough defensive value for Jordy Fernandez and Sean Marks to give him the go. Excuse me, Colin.
Yeah, I mean, Highsmith might be the best on-ball defender the team has right now, like depending on how you view Terrence Mann and Zaire Williams. So I do think Highsmith will make that final roster even with the injury, because also, like, what do you even do with him if you don't? It feels like you kind of need his salary to fill that up. It just makes sense to cut some of these other, like, long shot, not younger, but kind of these dead, like, middle ground guys that haven't proved anything in the league yet.
And Highsmith is 28 years old, so compared to a Jalen Wilson, compared to a Tyrese Martin, he's definitely a veteran in that sense. But I think you're right. His defense proves you enough, and we know how much Jordy Fernandez values defense and being good on that end of the ball, giving effort, being disciplined. So I think that Haywood Highsmith has enough in the tank to be able to make this roster. But that's another extremely interesting one, and one that you're just not sure of. It's one that it'll probably come down to cut day, and I think Sean Marks, that'll be one of the later decisions. We'll have to see how everything plays out, and assuming no one makes a tremendous leap for his roster spot between now and then, he does feel on the safer side, though, to me. Down under Dunker, once again, with a big one. My goodness. I'm a fan of the direction the Nets are headed. Plenty of possible cap space over the next few years. Heaps of picks. Youth with potential. And if we can land a top 3 pick next draft, we're good. The top 3 pick, that's the goal this season. The Nets do not want to be a good basketball team. But Colin, Nets do have a ton of cap space to move forward down the line. A little bit this year, but next offseason is when the floodgates open. Could you see them possibly going after a superstar?
I mean, they're definitely going to make the calls. Like, I think next class is I don't know off the top of my head exactly who the top guys are in the 2026 free agency class. I believe
Trae Young is going to be there.
Trae Young's in there. I believe isn't De'Aaron Fox, I think I think the extension kicks in.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
believe.
Russell Westbrook's a free agent today. That's crazy to think about. He might have to retire if nobody scoops him up.
Yeah, if he doesn't get signed by the Kings, it feels like he won't have a team this season.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think
That
about.
is crazy.
But yeah, regarding just this comment, I think the Nets are doing the rebuild right, regardless of if you don't like the draft selections or you don't like some of the acquisitions that are made. They have stockpiled draft picks, and they have set themselves in a position to be bad next year for the purpose of getting a top 3 pick, which they should have. But the lottery, you never know with that. And especially the top talent in this class going forward. You got AJ at BYU, and then Darren Peterson at Kansas.
Yep.
So if you can get, and then the Boozer twins.
Yeah,
So
Cam Boozer.
if you can get some of those guys, I think that really changes the direction of the franchise just in one offseason by getting a draft pick like that.
I agree with you, Dylan. I think that definitely it was not my favorite selection of Yegor GM, and I felt that was certainly a reach by Sean Marks in the front office. But they stockpiled 5 first-round picks in one season, and yeah, they could have traded up. They could have done more with their assets, but 5 first-round picks in one draft, that's nothing to cry about right there. So this is how the Thunder did it. They just stockpiled endless draft picks, and they still have them down the line. They still have a vault worth of first-round picks, but the Nets certainly have just a boatload. Not only first, they've acquired seconds now, and they're working with the Knicks' future basically through 2031. The Suns own a ton of picks, so the Nets are certainly in a good spot. And the good thing about that is you don't need all 5 of these draft picks to pan out. 1 being great, 2 being sufficient, maybe even a third playing a role for you down the line is going to be great when you look back at it 4 years from now. So, yeah, I don't think the Nets approach this draft in the right mindset, but they certainly had the picks to maybe make a couple of not so great decisions. But as for the cap space, I personally am not interested in a superstar. The Nets have gone down this route too many times. They've tried and tried and tried and failed and failed and failed. Katie, Kyrie, James Harden, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. There's just countless examples of the Nets going out there and forcing a bad team to just add superstars and think that, the depth will magically appear and it'll give us a championship run. But that's clearly not the case. A very interesting comment from Claude Smith that we have not gotten your temperature on yet, Colin. Claude says, Dariq Whitehead should be the next cut. Questionable health issues is my biggest knock against him. You're talking about a speedy, flashy, quick guard who likes to use his mobility well, but a guy that has suffered leg injuries, which is certainly detrimental to that cause. Where do you stand on Dariq Whitehead? I'm kind of right in the middle. I think I'm leaning toward him making the roster, but I wouldn't blame Jordy Fernandez if they've given up on him.
I am close to the middle. Like, I am not on the side of giving up on someone who was like the youngest guy in his draft class taken. Yep. And a former blue chip 5-star recruit.
Exactly.
And
a former top 3 out of his high school class.
And in such limited playing time, but showing in 20 games last season, the ability to shoot 40% from 3 is something that I feel like you can't pass up on going into his 3rd season without having a single offseason of health or season of health to go off of. I feel like you can definitely find a spot for him. Finding a spot for him to actually play in the rotation is a whole different story.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to dump him this soon into his career, that feels like a waste of the 18th overall pick.
Yep, former first-round pick who has been plagued by injuries to say the least. Let's just put it lightly that way. And a guy that is never played more than 20-something games throughout his NBA career in a particular season, and I think he played 2 games in his first season. So Dariq Whitehead is certainly a guy that has a big fat question mark looming over his head. And we are unsure of what he can do, what he will do. I mean, we can know what he can do. We've seen it in college. We saw it in high school. But the real question is, can he stay healthy on the basketball court? And the best ability is availability. And right now, Dariq Whitehead does not provide that. or anything else to this Nets team. Smash the like and hit subscribe if you haven't yet. We're getting ready to wrap up soon. We might take one more comment or two, but Colin, I really appreciate you coming on. Had an absolute blast chopping up the Nets talk with you. So tell everyone where they can find your work, and thanks again so much for hopping on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me again, Josh. The primary spot you're going to find me at for where I'll post all of my Brooklyn Nets SI content is on Twitter, and you can follow me at Simmons_Colin06. A lot of the Colin Simmons usernames were taken up, so that's what I'm stuck with, I guess. But that's where I'll post all of my Brooklyn Nets content and some of my other Mizzou content if you're into that. But once again, Josh, thank you. I love what you're doing, and I'm tuned in to what you have in the future.
Thank you, man. You're the best. Great having you on. Hopefully, in the future, we can do this again sometime. But Colin Simmons, Sports Illustrated, Brooklyn Nets on SI. You are the best, my friend. Thank you all if you're listening for tuning in, listening live, listening after the fact. I'll leave you all with one sign of hope because no matter what, we can always say, let's go Nets. Good night, everybody. Peace out.